I'm speaking to Kim Polman of Reboot the Future, who lives by the golden rule. Kim thinks that the golden rule is something which should apply to all of us. It's a universal concept, and I'd like you to explain firstly what the golden rule is about and how you came to adopt it as a way of living.
Well, I was inspired by actually the Pope's encyclical some years ago about climate change, and he talked about applying the principles of caring to the planet, and rethought the word dominate in the Bible, and or dominion, and I really like that idea. So I thought, well, let's take this golden rule principle, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. That's the Christian version of it, and add the planet to it. So we've modernized it, and we say, treat others and the planet as you wish to be treated. The reason that I started getting excited about this is the realization that this is such a fundamental, simple principle that can apply to all the values. It embraces all the things that we really want in how we relate to one another, about honesty, transparency, generosity. If you want people to be generous to you, then you should be generous to others. So you get back what you give, actually. So that's why it became important. And then when I started thinking about this as an application to issues of the world, I realized, oh my gosh, it actually applies to, say, slavery. If you don't want to be a slave, then you should not have slaves in your supply chain. Or if you want to breathe fresh air, then you should not have a factory that's throwing pollutants into the atmosphere, etc., etc. So I co-edited this book,
Right.
called Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation, which is a collection of articles that show the applicability of this golden rule to these different issues.
Right. How did you choose the people? I see you have some very recognizable names on the front cover there. Did you speak to each of them, and did they give you some insights and some wisdom around how it applies to the golden rule?
Well, yes, my co-author and I, Stephen Vasconcellos Sharp, and I approached a list of people that we thought were doing really great things in the world to solve issues, and wrote to them about the golden rule. I had summarized very briefly the Pope's words, and in the context of the big problems we face, finding this major but simple principle to motivate people to create that mindset change that we need to really change the systems of the world. So, yeah, and we got a very positive response. Of course, all these people live the golden rule. They may not have been completely aware of it as a guiding principle, but they certainly understood it and embraced it.
Right.
So they're all original articles.
Fantastic. And of course, you've decided to spend the rest of your life with somebody who's equally as inspiring, Paul Polman of Unilever. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship and shared values.
Well, we've been married 40 years, so yeah, we do share the same values, and we've tried to live them and share them, be examples to our children. Yeah.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit more about the book. What were the biggest insights for you? What did you learn from putting that book together that you didn't know before?
Well, we had a really hard time picking a title. We stewed and stewed. We had lists and lists, and we couldn't come up with it. And finally, we had to, because the book was going to be published. And so we locked ourselves in a room and said, we're not leaving until we get the title. And my co-author suddenly had this idea about the imaginal cell. The imaginal cell is the latent cell that's in the caterpillar that holds the vision of the butterfly. And there's a great metaphor here, because the caterpillar in his life eats and eats and eats and gorges and gorges and gorges, which is like the over-consuming society that we've evolved into. He gets to a tipping point after having eaten so much that he just stops and goes into his cocoon. Well, that old way of living starts decaying and going into a chaotic stew. But then at that moment, the latent imaginal cell starts coming alive.
What triggers it?
Well, the decaying, I suppose. So there's this it's all about chemical reactions, right? So this chaotic stew actually feels this new presence and feels threatened, and so starts attacking the imaginal cells. But the imaginal cells emit a frequency, a common frequency, and they find each other and they start collaborating and clustering and eventually overpower the old way of doing things. And that allows, of course, the new way to come out, which is the beautiful butterfly. So for us, the common frequency is this golden rule. Treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated. And I have found since working on this project that I only find amazing, beautiful, wonderful people.
Yeah.
And we're going to change the world.
Fantastic. So what you're saying is that imaginal cell is latent in all of us in some way.
Absolutely.
And if decay is going to be triggering it, what is going to happen to humanity, without sounding too pessimistic, to be able to trigger that cell?
Well, it's already been triggered. There are a lot of people talking about this, and there's a huge number of people talking about empathy and compassion and conscious capitalism, and all of this is part of that movement. All of these people are we do call them imaginal cells because it is about imagination as well. So we say imaginal cells. So all of these people are imaginals. And we are finding each other, and we're working to collaborate with each other and become a very powerful force in the world to create this big mindset change that needs to happen. So the golden rule actually exemplifies the very core of being human. And what I love most about it is that neuroscience actually proves that serving others, thinking about others, taking care of others actually is what makes us truly happy as humans. So it's simple, it's beautiful, it's intergenerationally understood, it's understood all around the world, it's apolitical, it's in all religions.
It's a very religious thought, that, isn't it? But what you're saying as well is that it's not necessary. You don't have to necessarily subscribe to an ideology or world religion to be able to unlock this potential and happiness that you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Oh no, the reason it's in every religion is because it is the core of being human.
Right.
We are mammals, so we care and we nurture naturally. But somehow in this competitive society where greed and arrogance and power has been honored and encouraged, it gets lost.
Right.
So we really want to revive this and have people connect with who they really are. And I believe that in the business world, people are under a lot of stress, because they're being asked by their companies to do things that are sometimes against their core values.
Right.
So if we can get people to recognize that this really is a core principle, then it strengthens them to understand and maybe find better ways of doing things.
You were talking earlier about reptiles and mammals, and the psychological difference between the two, or the biological difference rather, of the two. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, well actually this idea came from Karen Armstrong. She's a well-known historian of religions, has been studying all the religions of the world her whole life, and published a book a couple of years ago called 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. And in her introductory chapter, she explains reptiles as fighting, flight, food and fornication. That's how they survive. So we have this reptile side of us as well, because we have to survive as individuals and as species. But we are mammals, as I said before. And as a mammal, we nurture and we take care of one another. We have to feed, we have to teach, and we care. And so that is an instinct that so we have this kind of yin and yang, things that can conflict. But fortunately, in the world today, most of the people in the world are beyond the reptile moment of having to just fight to survive. So we have every day, let's say it's a spectrum, the one who is just fighting and flighting, and the other one who's reached nirvana, I say, who's no longer really living in this material state of mind. But I don't believe there's either extreme really exists. We're all on that spectrum. And so every day we do have a choice. Where do we want to be on that spectrum? How do we want to relate to other people? How do we want to relate to the planet?
Right.
So for me, the golden rule helps us position ourselves on that mammal side, because it asks us what I say and what I do. It helps us to ask what I say and what I do and how it affects others in the planet.
What advice do you give to people who feel powerless? There are so many people in sub-economic situations around the world who may listen to this and think that sounds like a very noble cause, but I'm just trying to find enough food for my family today. How does somebody internalize the golden rule and what you've just explained and turn it into something positive that they can actually practically work with?
For us, there's 3 requirements. People talk a lot about empathy and compassion, but it stops there. So the golden rule takes us beyond that. That is the first requirement to live the golden rule fully, to have empathy and compassion and to listen to what the other person needs. The second requirement is to have courage to get involved. And the third thing is to take action. So compassion, you and I can have a lovely conversation. I can listen to you, but I'm compassionate, but then I can walk away and not do anything. Whereas the golden rule, to really live the golden rule, you really have to take action and get involved. So that even gives a deeper meaning to it for us.
Right. You're obviously a very empathic person. You have a big heart. You care a lot about the world. Where did that come from? Was there a point in your childhood? Was there a point in your career maybe that you decided to take a different path?
Well, I grew up in a very loving family. We had a strong Christian upbringing, which I still adhere to. But it's an open doctrine, and I think, especially as an adult, and when I became more aware of other religions, and then when I started doing the research for this, I realized, oh my gosh, it's actually in every religion. And so I was really happy to learn that. I grew up in the I was born in the 50s and grew up in the 60s, and so of course that was, the anti-war time. There was a big environmental discussion was starting. I remember the first Earth Day. I lived out in the country, so I was very close to nature. We watched, every spring, my dad had these cards of the birds, and so as we would spot the birds, we put these birds, and I'm thinking back, wow, because I remember this room being full of these bird cards. There were a lot of different kinds of birds out there. Yeah. And I hope they're still there, because we read how many millions of birds that we've lost because of insecticides and pesticides. So we used to camp. We'd go to the national parks in the United States, which are just totally beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think caring for the planet was just ingrained in me at an early age, and just a deep love for the most core principle of Christianity, which is to love as your main mission in life.
Right. So for the CEOs and business leaders out there who didn't have that same experience, who don't have bird cards at home, what kind of advice would you give them to activating their imaginal cells? How do they go about that? Where do they start?
Well, to care about the planet, you must go out and experience nature. Go to the Amazon forest before it's completely burned down. Go to a mountain. Go down a river. Go hiking in a forest. Just enjoy a garden. It's wondrous. The variety and the beauty that we have on our planet is just astounding. And we need to cherish it because, quite frankly, if we don't have nature, we won't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
So experiencing these things firsthand is obviously very important to realizing you need to save it. A lot of people are just watching things on TV, they're reading about it in print, they're hearing about it on the radio. Do you suggest that CEOs get out more and actually experience firsthand what's happening from an environmental point of view, to firstly believe it, and secondly come up with some kind of a strategy based on the fact that they might have been moved emotionally by what they saw to actually act on it?
Oh my gosh, there's nothing more frightening than flying over Malaysia or Indonesia and seeing acres of native forest being burned for agriculture. It is truly frightening. And to realize that the diversity of those native habitats is being destroyed in an instant. What I've never understood is why it is so easy for humans to destroy something that has been so long in being built. It's
Right.
one of the things I'm very deeply challenged about
Right.
in the way our world functions. So I would love for humanity to respect not only what humans built, but what nature has evolved over.
Your insights obviously have some kind of currency with leadership. So whether you're a CEO or a world leader, they're both facing the same issues today. You know, business is facing the same environmental issues as a politician is. So, you know, my question to you really is, what have you learned through putting that book together and your experiences of traveling around the world? What advice would you give to leaders of any sort as to how they should be caring for the planet?
Well, what we really need to do is break down the silos in our educational systems, even within a company. So all the different departments that you have in a company, they need to be more connected to one another. You need to get different disciplines together so that, you know, the anthropologist can advise the biologist, that can advise the business leader, so that you get a better cross-section and a better understanding of one another. I think breaking down silos is really key right now.
Right. My last question to you is what your views on the young people of today are. They're obviously still working towards that butterfly stage of the evolution you spoke about earlier in terms of transformation, but they seem to have already got an advanced wisdom at a very young age. We're seeing people like Greta Thunberg inspiring millions of people around the world and motivating and energizing people around the world. What is your advice to young people and how should they be thinking?
Well, I would hope that they could hear the Imaginal Cells story and have hope, because a lot of them are quite despairing. There's different groups of young people. So there's the ones who are just going along with the old system. But we do need more and more to be embracing this new way of doing things, breaking down the silos, creating more interlocking systems, knowing how to work in complex systems of partnerships, which are much more complex than just in your own silo. When they're becoming educated, get a broad perspective. Follow your own curiosities and try to learn as much as you can about others and what they're doing. And, well, just keep trying.
Right. And one more question. If you had to consider who a real leader is in the world, who do you looked up to for inspiration?
Well, I really loved Nelson Mandela. I thought his sense of humility, his curiosity, his desire to help in a positive way no matter where he was, his acceptance of others, and his ability to forgive were really magnificent. He's just a beautiful example. I think that all leaders should listen to his example.
Do you think his imaginal cell had been activated?
Totally. Totally, from a young age.
Yeah, fantastic. Kim, thank you so much for your time. It's been great speaking with you. Thank you.